Hello everyone, today we are taking a look at the WalkSnail VRx. And I actually have two of these. Yeah, I have a set attached to my HD0 goggles. I actually ordered, like many of you, a pre-order where I got a VTX with it as well on special. That special is no longer running. But then Caddx sent one for review as well. So I guess in this one, we're technically testing two of them because, yeah, I did use and test both of them. And we've seen VRXs launched before, and it's really a good way if you've got a set of analog goggles like the SkyZone 04X, or maybe you've got the Orca FPV1 pilot goggles, I think, or maybe you even have the original Orca goggles. And yeah, I did test all those. Matter of fact, I have two sets of SkyZones. Yeah, that's the HD0 VRx. We've seen that before, and it's a really good way, if you've got one of those goggles, that you can decide to branch outside of those goggles and try a different video system. So far, the only company that we haven't seen do this, DJI. And I don't suspect they're interested. But in this video, I'm going to have all sorts of different flight footage and comparisons for you. I actually reshot all of them at least twice. But I think what's most important about this is to understand not necessarily about the product, but the limitations of some of our goggles, at least the ones I can test. And by the way, we should all look forward to Joshua Bardwell's video. He is pooling together his resources to get a bunch of different goggles and do some testing. So whatever I haven't tested here, I'm sure he'll test as well as a whole slew of goggles. But one of those limitations is this can do 1080p, but a lot of our goggles can't do 1080p. HD0 can do 1080p. Matter of fact, HD0 goggles are the only goggles on the market, to my knowledge, that can not only do 720 and 1080p, but they can do the high and standard frame rate as well. DiviMath updated the firmware and made 1080p high frame rate and high frame rate in general work. So we could potentially see updates with these other goggles if their companies are interested in making their goggles a little bit more flexible. So first up are the two SkyZone 04X goggles. So I have a V1 that originally launched without the 60 frames per second DVR, and a V2 which did have the 60 frames per second DVR. And I can tell you with the original, I can't do 1080p. But with the new one, with the 60 frames per second DVR, I can do 1080p. But neither can do the high frame rate. Next, with the Orca goggles, neither one of them I could do the 1080p. I tried a bunch of different times, tried looking at all the different settings that were available, making sure the firmware was up to date. 1080p just didn't work for me, and high frame rate, that didn't work either. So that looks like another nod if you're trying out WalkSnail and potentially other VRXs that HD0 goggles, the value continues to go up. So quickly around the hardware specs. We do have a fan in here, and you can hear it while you're wearing it, but it's not terribly noisy. But it's something you should know, it's not completely silent. We have two patch antennas here on the front and two circular polarized antennas up top. They are left-hand circular polarized, but you can match that with your quad with whatever antennas. And you probably noticed on my secondary set that were on my HD0 goggles, I did try upgraded antennas as well, and we will see a little bit of that footage. We also have a mount up here, and we've got a 5-way joystick. We've got a play button that activates your DVR and other functions, and then we've got our back button. If you're not getting a picture in your goggles, press and hold this back button down for 5 seconds. It says that in the manual, but it can oftentimes catch us out. And this little pinhole right over here is our binding button to our VTX. Around here on the side, we have our SD card slot, and then we have our power insert there as well. Just screws on the back. We've got our HDMI that we absolutely need, as well as some heat dissipation or vent holes on the bottom, and nothing on the final side. It also comes with this 2-in-1 DC power cable, as they state. So this would power your goggles as well as the VRX. You could have your source, your goggle battery in here, or if your goggles came with one of these long leads, you would just plug it into one end, and the other end plugs into your battery, which you presumably keep in your pocket or somewhere in your lap. XT60 on this particular one. And then supply power that way. We also get an HDMI cable to use to plug in from our VRX to our goggles, but you know, they're straight, so it's not all that friendly for keeping it attached all the time. You might want to order one of these HD0 VRX HDMI connectors because they did a really nice thing for us and they put right angles on it. Caddx, please update this to have right angles like the HD0 cable, please. You also get two pieces of kind of a foam tape that you can use that to adhere these to the front of your goggles if you wish to do so. Two hex keys and a little mount, presumably, to run right through here. Quick start guide in 2 languages. Okay, our first sample flight, 720p, 25 milliwatt, 25 megabit. Each one of these flights is going to last about a minute, so you might want to use the YouTube buttons to slow down the playback to look at the various receptions. Then we'll go up to 25 megabit and we'll go all the way up to 500 megabit, which technically, because I'm testing the 1S VTX, it does not actually go up to 500 milliwatts. It actually goes to 350 milliwatts. But the goggles, as well as the stats that it produces, don't match up. Something else to note is I was not able to get the VRX to record at 1080p beyond arming the quad. And that's something I want to draw your attention to, but that section, that the kind of proof of concept, will come after we've played this various flight footage here where you can look at the video reception. We will also be doing a comparison between 25 megabit and 50 megabit. The short answer on that is I have found that when it comes to penetration and as far as the range, when I go over the fence and I go down below grade or I go lower than the ground as far as where I'm sitting, that 25 megabit works the best. It gives us most image clarity when it comes to those sort of things. Of course, if you've got clear line of sight running 50 megabit, it should be fine. I found that when I was inside my typical flying space, that 50 megabit was a very clear picture. Of course, you get a higher quality picture as well, but you do have a tendency, as it currently stands with the firmware, of having a little bit of that image breakup, which is how WalkSnail handles things differently than we see in other video systems. WalkSnail video is basically, well, in many ways, it's similar to the DJI. It seems as though that has been their goal. This is our final standalone flight. This one is as labeled 350 milliwatts. Sometimes I stumble over megabits and milliwatts. I try to make those corrections on screen. I have to say that I'm pleased that WalkSnail/Caddx has made a concerted effort from a hardware manufacturing perspective to make their VTXs micro compatible. You know, I have a very strong bias for micros, so I'm always looking for systems to make their, you know, weight savings as they have. Caddx has, or WalkSnail has, 2 different VTXs, one of which is lighter than another. Depending upon when you buy or what you selected, you may find you have one particular camera that weighs, what is it, 1.5 grams more than the other, as well as the secondary VTX has the heat shield that you can remove safely, according to them, and save another gram or 2. In this section, we're doing our comparisons. So obviously I've got things labeled so you can easily read those out. We've got the upgraded AXI antennas from Get FPV. You could probably get them other places as well. And we are running 720p, 25 milliwatts, and 25 megabits as we circle the house. I wanted to do this because it's the lowest power, so you would potentially see the biggest breakup, but it also gives you an idea of the quality difference between stock as well as AXI antennas on the VRX. Of course, there's a big variable when you're using antennas on your quad. In my particular case, I'm using the ORTV antenna, and it's a linear antenna. I did also test with a stock linear antenna that came on another quad, which is in a whoop. So you'll see a little bit of that when I do my proof of concept when it comes down to recording at 1080p on the VRX beyond ARM. And this is our comparison where we're just comparing. All other things are being equal here. Both stock, 50 megabits on the left, 25 megabits per second on the right, and the different image quality and breakup that we get running the same path. That was one of the reasons why I had to redo all these flights was my first 2 times out, there were a couple of flights, because I was trying to do this all during the same period of time, that just weren't consistent enough to, even with the editing tools of slowing them down and speeding them up, that it would really give you much visual comparative abilities when it comes to, you know, these sorts of comparisons, left and right side. So I had to reshoot this at least twice. There may have been a third and fourth time, but I'm not certain of that because it took me a few days of waiting. You know, I had to wait for weather. Didn't want it to be a super over cloudy day, but these had to be relatively close as far as the days go. And you can see I'm wearing different pants. Another comparison at 350 milliwatts. So this is the maximum output of the little VTX I've been testing. Quite honestly, I don't have their larger VTX. I'm a micro guy, so I'm really only interested in the VTX that is micro compatible. And because micros are so sensitive to weight, we got to go the 1S or the light version of the VTX. You can get this still on a little bit of a savings if you buy the VRX with a VTX, and you get to choose the different VTXs, so the prices are going to range. It saves you some money, depending again upon which VTX you choose to get it with, versus buying the VRX separately and buying your VTXs separately as well. Of course, as far as availability of that combination, you just kind of have to check your local vendors, but I'll also put links down in the video description where this product is currently available as always. And yet another comparison. Still Axie on the left, stock on the right, 200 milliwatt. Now, this seems kind of redundant to do so much of this comparison, but I guess in my attempts to be thorough, maybe I've included too much for what I can do. You know, those of you that will ask the range questions, range or distance is kind of a sticky situation here in the U.S. With our new regs and the FAA laws that are coming about, that range testing is something that can get you in some unwanted attention, I guess is the way I've been putting it. So for our purposes here, or my purposes, this is much more microcentric sort of testing when it comes to the WalkSnail VRx and the video transmission system. So I've done what I can, especially in my place, in order to highlight some of the differences and give you several samples. Of course, you may want to watch this on a relatively large screen in order to get the best possible diagnosis of the image and quality. And, well, I say breakup, but for those that maybe started FPV when we were always in HD availability, the breakup is just more of a breakdown of the image quality than it is breakup. You know, analog was breaking up in my estimation. HD0 has a breakup as well. I think it tends to be, well, in my opinion, HD0 breakup is quite a bit different. But we should stick to talking about the WalkSnail video system and the video evidence that we have established here in front of you. By the way, all these comparisons, of course, they're all different flights. None of them are at the same time, so I had to do my best in order to speed them up, slow them down. And some are a little bit better than others. Despite my best efforts, I sync the beginning of the flight on first prop movement and on landing as well, to give you a few spots that might be easily or readily comparable. I also did a comparison with the WalkSnail goggles. They're actually the Fat Shark Dominator HDs, the same ones you find that on all black, but the Dominator HDs have the black, or the white and the gray. And as you can see there, we've just got VRX labeled on the left-hand side, 720p, 25 milliwatt, 25 megabit. Didn't put the 25 megabit on there. And then on the Fat Shark Dominator HDs, 720p, 25 milliwatt, 25 megabit on the right-hand side. Trying to do the same path as I always do. It would have been nice to have a flying buddy and be able to fly these potentially at the same time, although that might introduce a variable with having two people sitting relatively close to one another. I should also mention that the Fat Shark goggles do have the stock antennas on them. I took the second VRX antennas off and put them on the Fat Shark goggles in order to make sure I had an equal 1-to-1. This is the section where we display how you manipulate the settings of the goggles using the joysticks on the top, and you get your view through. How did I record this? Well, I plugged it into a cam link from Elgato, which is one of the many products I use to kind of run the camera setup here in the house. And so then I was able to record it. The cam link works fine for any of the resolutions at any of the frame rates, works just fine. So you may be able to find screens out there that you could attach to your radio or set up on a tripod that would do all the recording levels that is available on the WalkSnail VRx. But this is my sample of where I kind of show that as soon as you arm, it goes to no SD and it stops the recording, as you can see there. So it was recording fine up to the point where I armed the quad and then it stopped. Again, I tried this on 2 different quads, 2 different VTXs. The original VTX that was the 1S VTX, and then the secondary one that came in a little bit lighter. Tried them both. Both did the same thing. Made sure I had the updated firmware, but I do not have any beta firmware installed. This is what's currently publicly available as of my recording. And this was a bit of a stumbling block for me because it kept not recording and I kept thinking I was doing something wrong. I did report this more than a week ago to the individual that I had had some messages with through Caddx. I haven't gotten any responses, whether it's a known issue or they're working on it or what they're planning to do. I can't give you any more information on that. Maybe Joshua Bardwell's contacts will have additional information on what they're doing. But of course, this firmware seems to be a work in progress, as it is in just about all the HD systems that we are currently using in FPV. This particular quad is not prop guarded, so I'm not going to fly it, but you see when I arm, it'll go to no SD and it'll stop recording again. And then you have to power cycle the VRx in order to be able to try again. So that's what I've got when it comes to the WalkSnail VRx. Hopefully we'll find some changes going forward so that we don't have that issue with no SD when we're recording 1080p on the VRx. It just stopped. And I did try multiple cards, although they're the same brand, SanDisk, and they're the SanDisk Extreme 2 cards. I've tried both the 32 gigabyte version and the 16 gigabyte versions. I've got multiple of those cards. I tried them all. When it came to recording normally, they work fine. When I take those cards and put them into like small action cameras that I have that record 1080p, they work fine. I formatted them in the goggles. So I've really tried to cover all my bases as far as that particular issue goes. If you have one of these WalkSnail VRx's that is recording in 1080p, I would sure like to know. I'd sure like to do a comparison between your setup and my setup. So if you could leave a comment down in the comment section below or reach out to me in any of the methods that are available, I'm certainly interested. But that was my findings using both VRx's with all the components I have. If you're interested in this, and it's a pretty good value, if you're interested in WalkSnail and you want to try out WalkSnail and you don't want to buy $600 goggles, you just want to spend, maybe $250 and you get a VRx with it, it's a pretty good value, especially when you buy the combo. I think that value goes up a little bit because it saves you some money buying a combo. Unfortunately, you can't click a count button on the VRx to get the same sort of price discount on the VRx side and just add a bunch of VRx's. That would save you even more. And last, I want to give a big shout out to Boner FPV. He has made a map of the exterior of the house and it is awesome. I really appreciate all the work and effort he put into that. I can't imagine how much time he spent on that. That is in Velocidrone. I will be featuring it fully coming up in a video relatively shortly, I think. So just look for Nick Burns' house in Velocidrone, add that map or track in Velocidrone, and you should be able to fly my house. There are some things that are added to make it even more interesting than you typically might see in my backyard. Although I wonder if putting the swing set back might be a good thing. Because I did hear Infinity Loops. If you want to see somebody that's already flown it, go to Infinity Loops channel, Heads. He was flying it for a better part of 2 hours and really exploring it quite a bit. Of course, he's got fantastic freestyle skills, doing all sorts of fantastic maneuvers. I'll link that particular live stream when he tried out the Velocidrone track from Boner FPV. Again, thank you to Boner FPV as well as Heads for featuring it on his Infinity Loops channel, and I'll be bringing it to you myself relatively soon. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions about the Nick Burns track in Velocidrone or the WalkSnail VRx, please let me know in the comment section below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching.